All right, everybody, we're going live here. We have a very special show for you today on Keeping It Real. Today we have Regina Drury from Wilmington, North Carolina. And I'm really excited about this episode because we're going to hear how Regina was able to sell 67 homes as a solo agent by probably working super hard and having all kinds of awesome strategies that we can learn from. So I'm super excited about that. Your host today is me, Kevin McCarthy. I'm the co-founder of Real Geeks, and Todd Tramonte, a broker, top producing broker from the Dallas, Texas area. And with that said, let's just kick it off. I'd love to hear more about your background and how you got started, Regina.
Sure. So believe it or not, my background was I was an accountant prior to this. But then I started flipping properties on the side, and I was doing that pretty much without having any money. So I figured out how to be creative with getting financing and buying homes. And so then I decided I wanted to go get my license so that I can flip property and buy and sell and keep the commission myself. Well, that was the goal. But then I got hooked up with the company I was going to start with, and they had a goal. It's called 3-2-1, 3 listings, 2 under contracts, and 1 sale within 90 days. So I decided to one-up it and do it in 30 days. So I did 3 listings, 2 under contracts, and 1 sale. My sale was actually on my 30th day in the business, and I sold 31 homes within 6 months. So how did I do that? Well, I did that with basically adopting a 500 home neighborhood by calling them and door knocking. So first looking for that first listing. And then once I got the listing, then calling them and door knocking them to tell them all that I just listed this house. Once I sold it, did the same exact thing. I had little notes, like I would write a note like this person hung up on me or this person slammed the door on me. If I went to their house and the house was like all nasty outside, well, I would just leave a door hanger instead of actually knocking on the door. And actually, my favorite story is the couple where the husband hung up on me. And then I went to the door and the wife answered the door. The husband wasn't home. So I asked her if they'd be interested in selling the home. And she said no. And I said, do you have any idea how much money you could get on your house right now? This was back in May 2005. And so she said, no, I'd love to know, though, how much I could get. And that was the door opening. I sold their house. I sold them a house. And we still laugh 15 years later about the fact that her husband had slammed the phone on my face.
I love it. And I got to know Regina at the unofficial Real Geeks user conference last year. And the beginning of your story is the exact beginning of mine. I was in another business, flipping houses, only got my real estate license to support my own flipping and make those commissions. And then I got sucked in too. So I love hearing the beginning of your story. And I want to point a couple of things out for all of our, our viewers and our listeners, and just to pick your brain a little bit more. But you adopted a neighborhood of 500 homes, or you adopted 500 homes.
Yep.
And you said you called it and you door knocked it. Now, How many of us weren't willing to do that, right? But you did, and you sold, you said 31 houses in your first 6 months.
31 houses, yeah.
So basically our big headline here was how you can sell 60 something houses in a year as a solo agent. And you were on that pace in your very first year. And there are people in their 20th year striving to get there. So what more can you share with folks just about that super simple? I know you've done a lot of things since then. We'll get into that. But what can you talk about just that year one strategy of like, hey, I've got something, it works, and I'm going to keep doing it and really build a base of business that way?
So I think by starting with, it was 3 neighborhoods that you could walk all together. So it was 500 homes, but it was three neighborhoods that were connected. Okay. And I think by starting there, as I got a sign that was in the neighborhood, and then once it went under contract and put the sign up, people started to get familiar with my name. So if I instead prospected the entire town, right, I wouldn't have gotten known so quickly. So what happened was, just by me adopting that neighborhood and becoming the neighborhood expert there, I knew the floor plans right away. So when somebody called or said, you know, oh yeah, I might want to sell my house, and I'd say, well, tell me about your floor plan, or what's your house like? And then immediately, because I knew it,
Yep.
I had confidence, which is, hard to get in your first couple of months, but I had confidence that I knew their house. And then they were confident that I knew their house. And the question of how many houses have I sold or how long have I been in this business never came up. So I think by really focusing in that niche, it helped me expand very quickly.
Yeah. And I think you've made some incredible points for people to take away there. The reason I asked you that is because I wanted to get to the point of like, how were you confident so quickly? Because so many people, their failure to launch quickly breeds some lack of confidence. And then that becomes a huge obstacle to overcome. So they either fail and never make it, or it takes them so much longer to build that confidence level. And I think you did it in the way that I probably recommend and coach and beg agents to do it more than ever, which is to focus or niche or whatever you want to call that, right? But you can become an expert on a 500 home community in a matter of days if you're willing to put in the work. And then you can increase that level of expertise over time. And here's the reason I believe that. You and I have been doing this 15, 20 years, whatever the numbers are. If you got a call about a neighborhood that you didn't know quite as well, I can become an expert on that neighborhood pretty darn quickly. I can go do my homework, know what I'm talking about, and be able to drive real value for you in a number of hours. Depends on price points and areas and all that, but I can figure that out. But instead, so many people in the beginning chase anything, anywhere,
right?
And they gain no expertise. I mean, not as far as geography or property type or price point. They gain some contract knowledge, that kind of thing. But what you did was set yourself up for success, whether you knew it or not. And my gut says you did, because you came from another business background. But
it was free. It was free. It cost nothing.
Right.
So there was no Zillow, no realtor.com. It was free, So
and you weren't doing your mail yet, right? You were just calling and knocking, which
just calling and knocking. Yeah.
Yep.
I was keeping notes though about people. Like this one said, I'm only going to sell when I'm feet first out of my house, and this one says drop dead. I kept notes, and even though they would say those things, I would still go back, because really I looked at it as I didn't want to go back to accounting. So what else, what other options did I have?
Amen to that. My wife's an accountant.
It was really cool about maybe 4 or 5 years after that, this pays dividends. I don't knock that neighborhood anymore. I don't even call that neighborhood, which is a problem, because honestly, if something works, don't quit it. You know what I mean? Imagine how many houses I could be selling now. So anyway, when I did stupidly quit it, right, I still get dividends paid back. So I still get people that contact me. Well, about 5 years after doing that, when I stopped door knocking, I got this lady that called me, and she said, hey, so my neighbor, I was talking to her and asked her, who should I hire to sell my home? She says, I wasn't living there. My son was living there. But, when I was looking for an agent, I asked her, who should I hire? Who's familiar with this area? And she said, well, the one agent I wouldn't call is this one that she's so annoying. She calls us and knocks on our doors. And this seller was like, that's exactly who I wanted.
You would never want a persistent, consistent, dedicated expert, would you? Wait a second. Yeah.
So I think getting that reputation of being that annoying agent, it pays dividends.
Right. Well, as long as their version of annoying means persistent and consistent. And that was kind of my point, is wink, wink, annoying. If you're annoying because you show up every single time and you're on your game, that's a great version of annoying. If you're annoying because you call at midnight and you have no value to offer, that, that's a whole nother thing. Or because you're, the most obnoxious person at the neighborhood Christmas party, that's not the kind of annoying you want to be. But let me point out a couple of takeaways, just because you're a million miles beyond this now. You made a couple of good points. If it's working, why stop? Now, on the one hand, period, end of statement, great point to make. On the other hand, because at some point in your career, you might not want to knock on doors anymore. You might want to create some leverage. And so I know you've layered in some direct mail now. Yeah. And so there's a point to be made here about, if you'll put in the really annoying hard work in the beginning, then you can create some leverage off that. So you might be able to door knock a neighborhood for a few years and then maintain that with mail and go add another one, or with phone calls or whatever. We're not necessarily saying everyone go knock doors. Now that it's obviously a valuable strategy, but I think what we're both saying is, when you can find something that works, keep doing that. And then maybe after a significant period of time, not 6 weeks, not one, not 3 months, not 1 year, after an established period of time, then maybe you add some leverage and grow your strategy. But this worked and you kept at it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I failed though at leaving. So when I first started, the market was booming, right? And I knew all I had to do was go get a listing. So that was my big energy. Like right now is just like 2005. If you get a listing, it's pretty much sold. So that was my energy as I was out there to find a seller, because that meant I found a paycheck, right? Well, when the market declined, I lost my spunk or my motivation. And so then I started doing letters, right?
Yep.
But when I was doing letters, I was doing letters to expires. I didn't continue doing letters to those neighborhoods. And that's a mistake.
Yep.
So like how you said, you got to carry it on. You know, it's easy to look back at what went wrong in the past, right? It's easy to say, okay, I should have done that, right?
Yep.
But I think that's what happens, is that something works and then you start something else and you fail to continue that thing that worked.
Yeah. And that's why I love these Keeping It Real episodes, right? Because there are people watching and listening now, and then we'll catch the recording, that are doing 10 million in GCI a year and that are really, you know, grinding to do 50K in GCI this year. I mean, we represent the entire spectrum, and that's great. It's a wonderful community of agents that share a lot. And so many of us need to be reminded, like, why did I stop doing that? I should go back to that. And other people are like, if that works, I will do it. You know, I'm just trying to get going. So it's valuable for everyone. That's my point.
Yeah.
Is what you're sharing is really valuable. And I absolutely appreciate your humility about that. Like, nope, hold on. Let's point out where I made a mistake, because so many people would never do that. But that's why that's why I invited you to join us, because you were such a hit at the Real Geeks event from the audience, right? You weren't a panelist yet. Now, by all means, God willing, we'll do that event someday in the future again, and we'll have you up there. But the point is, you were such a contributor from the audience, and often saying, well, here's how I messed that up, and here's what I learned. And that's super compelling. So again, thank you for that. Now let me jump one question ahead, and then Kevin, interrupt me if we're getting questions from the audience or whatever. But I want to make a really glaring point here about your business, which I'm not sure a lot of people know. So you're selling 50, 60, 70, as many as 90 something, I think, in the past, homes in a year, but you're also doing an incredible amount of travel, right? So I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that like every month or every quarter you get away for
every other month. I'm dying
every other
right
month,
now. Yeah.
You travel for what, 2 weeks?
It depends. Like I go to Caribbean a couple times a year. I was going on a cruise every year. I go to Italy or Greece for a couple of weeks. So like last year I went to Oktoberfest in Germany. That was awesome. So yeah, I go away for a few weeks at a time, or I'll go away for a week. But I'm doing that every other month, at least every other month.
Okay. So we could spend the rest of the whole episode on how awesome that is, but let's point something out here, because here's the reality. And I just think, let's just face reality. There's a lot of people that hear your story and they'll immediately tell themselves how, well, she can, but I couldn't. Well, this, you know, she started in a hot market. Her area is better than mine. She's, you know, she's this and I'm not, you know, whatever. But what you're proving is that one way or another, it is possible as a solo agent, and we'll get into this in a minute, at times with some help, but most of the time without
usually
help.
No help.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're able to do significant production with significant income. And this is the big piece that no one would expect: significant time away from your business. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how you do that. What are the systems, the tools, the resources? What's the mindset? How do those things work together?
So first of all, before you even talk about systems, in order to be able to go on any vacation, you have to be able to accept that you're going to walk away a little bit. That's big, right? I mean, how many people can walk away and not answer their phone? So that's the first thing. Second thing is, at times I hire a call company like Pat Live, for example. It's a big help, because I give them a script. They ask the questions. Like they'll ask, you know, are you looking to buy or sell a house? And then they will send me a text and an email with the message. And I can preset it up so that way they can set up an appointment with the customer based on my schedule. So it's one of them. The other thing is, of course, all my files are on Google Drive. I was doing DigiSign even before we were staying home. So that's a big deal, having access to the files on the fly. And then I use SkySlope. Let me tell you, that thing, it's been really helpful, because with SkySlope, I was able to set up all of my to-dos. So I say, if I got a listing, here's the to-do. If I get a buyer, here's my to-do. When the listing goes under contract, here's the to-do. I get everything on the to-do list, right down to, okay, so the listing just went under contract. Now you need to know the utility information. Then I got the next date. You got to notify the buyer's agent with the utility companies, right? I've got a to-do on there that reminds the client not to cancel their homeowner's insurance yet. I get a to-do on there to say to the client, where are the keys? Here's where you're going to leave the keys in the garage door remotes. And then I got a to-do to tell the agent. So the cool thing about this is, like, I just had 12 houses under contract. And when you don't have an assistant, you've got 12 houses under contract. You don't know which one did you already tell the keys, right, which one did you tell not to turn off the insurance. When you have your to-do list, you could just go in each day and you see what the items are. And then it tells you, like, what forms that you're still waiting for that you need. Super organized, and I can do it from my phone. I can do it from my computer. So another thing is,
can I play typical agent with you for a second?
Yeah.
You're really not trying to convince all of us that you can have 12 pending transactions and it's manageable because of a to-do list, right? That's not what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's a magic genie somewhere. It's not, checklists are not getting that done. There's no way.
Over 60% of my business comes from my past clients and my past client referring business to me. So not only am I doing this business without a closing coordinator on a regular basis, but I'm doing this business well enough to get people to refer people to me.
No way, blah, blah, blah. You can do it, but I can't do it. There's no, I'm obviously being annoying on purpose here. The reason is because that is what most people will say. No.
Yeah.
I'm being told I've got to leverage with a bunch of staff. I've got to have a transaction coordinator. I've got to have a client care person. I've got to have a courier. I got to have a sign company. I've got to spend at least as much as I'm bringing in. And that's just the way it is. There's no way you can do it all by yourself. And you're telling me that you can do dozens and dozens and dozens of transactions a year.
Yeah.
Travel all over the world.
And I don't always tell my clients that I'm away, because I use Ring Central, and I use their app, and I dial from my I dial from my office number on my Ring Central app, which I can use, use it in China. You can use it any place you have internet. So I use my app to call my customers from my office. Now, the funny part is, sometimes when I do have an assistant at the time, if I use my app to call my customers, well, then sometimes the customers miss the call and they call the number back, and my assistant will just say, oh, she'll call you right back as soon as she can.
So let's talk about that for just a second. And let me just check in with Kevin. Do you have any questions you want to throw out before I do one more?
Yeah, we had a couple questions come in about the expireds. So people are saying, have you got any tips for expireds? Is there anything you can do with an expired other than calling them? Which is an interesting one.
Bring them donuts. So, what else can you do besides call them? Well, I was mailing them, so you could do that. You could always go to the door, but to be honest with you, I've never been one to go up to the door of an expired, but yeah, I've sent them letters.
Yeah. On the door knocking, another question was, let's say that you are just getting started out as an agent and you don't have your track record to talk about. What do you talk about when you show up at the door?
So I didn't have a track record. I was an accountant, so I didn't sell any houses. So I went up to the door and I asked them if they knew anybody that was looking to sell their home in the neighborhood. And the reflex was always no. Everybody said no. And then I said, well, can you imagine? There's hardly any houses for sale in this neighborhood, and there's people that want to live here. Can you imagine what you could get for your house right now? And then that's usually the way in. At that point, then they would typically say, no, I didn't have any idea. And so then I'd ask them, well, do you want me to figure out what you could get? And then a lot of times they'd say no, but sometimes they'd say, yeah, sure, I'm curious. Well, then I'd ask them, well, where would you move to? And so then that opened the door in that discussion. So before I even gave them any price or went any further, I was already getting them thinking, imagining where they might move to.
Yep. It's a great opening question. You're almost always going to get a no. Even if they're thinking yes, they're like, who the heck is she? So it's always a great question to say, hey, have you ever thought about or dreamt about moving or living someplace else?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean like, are you going to be making a move in the next 60 days? And would you sign right here? That's,
Yeah.
that's not likely to happen. Although if you do enough of them, every once in a while, you can just get lucky like that, right? But that's not the game you're playing. She was playing name recognition and relationship and follow-up and an opportunity to make that call later and be well received. And it obviously worked. But she made this point earlier when she was telling that story for the first time. She gained confidence by being able to get to know that neighborhood and that product and those homes really quickly. It wasn't about track record. When she presented herself as confident, they ran with it. They trusted the confidence. Is that right?
Yeah, you know what's cool too is when you're the first one to approach them and you're the first one to get them jogging their mind about maybe they might move, they're not really wondering if you're experienced. Yep. They're now thinking like, okay, so if I do sell my house, where will I go? And how long will it take for you to sell my house? They're not thinking, do you sell houses? you
right.
know?
Right. Yeah. And not very many people are out there hustling like that. So that's not something you have to worry you're going to get, sideswiped. Someone's going to steal your positioning in their mind.
And I want to mention one more big deal. I did this 15 years ago, right? I didn't bring any pumpkins to anyone's house. I didn't bring any candy. I didn't spend any money on anything. So I think a lot of times, we're coached and we're told that you can bring things, right? But I think a lot of times as agents, we feel better about ourselves to knock on someone's door because we're giving them something. But understand that, I've got past clients that I'm still working with, helping them buy and sell over the years that I met 15 years ago that I didn't bring them anything. If you give them good service, even if it's an idea of how much their house could be worth, that's good service to them. You don't need to spend any money on things.
Yeah. We always say differentiate with excellence, right? So if you show up with value and knowledge and something that's helpful to them, then that's a great differentiator. You just made a point that I have to double click on here for a second. But you said back then you didn't spend any money. And I know that right now you still don't spend that much money.
I don't spend any money.
Unbelievably profitable. And I want to point that out to people right now. I don't have anything against teams. I run a team and a brokerage. So obviously I'm a fan of that model, but for those of you that have been convinced by other people, it doesn't matter who it was, that you cannot run a high production, high profit, high freedom business as an individual agent, here is the proof that you can. And you don't need to tell anybody anything you don't want to tell them. But as far as the level of profitability of your business, what would you or could you or will you share?
I'm about 90%.
Holy moly, Kevin! I run my radio show from right here, and I have a soundboard with sound drops on it, and I am okay. We got to do it. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah. I was trying to maintain the self.
That deserves one. That's mind blowing. It really is.
Have the self control. So just stop for a second, everybody, and real quick, pencil, paper, pen, pad, cell phone, calculator. Number of transactions that you feel you could be capable of at max capacity with very simple systems and tools. And we're going to get to some other tools and systems that Regina uses. Could you do 40? Could you do 50? Could you do 60? Is it 24? Is it 30? Is it 90? And then imagine at your price point, at your average commission rate, whatever that is, what 90% profitability would look like. Holy moly. Regina and I have been talking offline about her growth, and I'm like, hey, careful. Don't grow too far past 90% profitability.
I stumped my growth because I've been so profitable for so long that it's really hard for me to hire, staff and, spend money on Zillow and realtor.com and all that other, because when I look at the numbers, so I see all the examples that all the companies give their agents on where their profit margin should be. And I'm like, gosh, I'm so much better than that. I don't want to go to that.
And we all have our mental blocks and our head junk that limits us, right? And for you, at some point, some form of leverage and
leverage would be good. It would be good.
And at times you've had support, you've had an assistant, and they haven't always lasted for varying reasons or whatever. But I think you've got your head around. It would be worth you know, paying someone well and to find the right person to give you that extra layer, either room to grow or more room to breathe and experience more freedom. So, you know, we could talk more about that if that's what's most valuable to folks.
Well, the only point that I'll make about that is, so my hang up has always been about that it's going to take away from my net income, right? Which has been my hang up about adding staff. And so it's a hang up. In the reality, I keep not realizing about all this extra time that I'd have because I wouldn't be the admin, right? So I'd have all this extra time, and then, you know, I could do all these additional things like the additional letters and the door knocking and stuff again that was so successful. So it really is, it's just, you know, we're our biggest competition, right? It's all in our own head.
It's recategorizing the cost of that as reinvesting in your business with a huge return.
Right.
Huge return, right? Right now at your production level with all the opportunities you have, if you had someone that would give you, let's just say 15 hours a week back, how many transactions would it take to be able to pay them very well and you still net out tremendously? Or maybe some of that trade-off isn't even dollar for dollar. It's dollar for headspace. It's dollar for sleep. It's dollar for relaxation. Now you're doing the traveling, which is great, but I know you're hustling really hard.
Well, your mind is always working, you know? Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, I think I know, you know, that intellectually, sometimes we just need to keep hearing it and start believing it and then and see the results of it. But Kevin, are there any other questions rolling in?
They're asking about what is your Real Geeks website? Some people want to go check it out.
It's my name, reginadrury.com.
I like it.
Yeah. Or you can try lelandforsale.com, but you'll get to the same spot.
Great.
A quick thought just on follow-up, because we had mentioned door knocking and then you had mentioned a lot of calling, and now you're doing a lot of direct mail. So what does that direct mail strategy look like?
I'm developing it. So I hired an intern last year. Really, I had a past client call me and say, hey, my son is a junior in high school and I'm junior in college, and he's about to go abroad for a little bit and he needs to make a little bit of money. Do you have any job? So I was like, well, at the time I just started a full-time assistant. So I was like, well, all right, send him and I'll figure it out. Or actually, no, I didn't have a full-time assistant. I didn't have anybody yet. So I told him, come on and I'll figure it out. So he came aboard and I was trying to figure out something to do, and I had not done letters in a while. So I said, all right, let's just pick a neighborhood. We'll pick a neighborhood. I'll write a letter and I'll have you send it out. So I started doing that. We did it for about 8 weeks and then he left. And while he was gone, I kind of wasn't really doing it much. And then my husband said, hey, you know, why don't we buy some machines, right? Some mailing machines, and let's, you know, put this on our calendar, and let's make sure that we hit the neighborhoods every month. So we started adding, and by the end of the year, we were at like 2,000 letters. So we were at 2,000 homes. And a month, 2,000 homes a month. And what happened was my intern came back. And at that point, I was like, okay, we're going to add this machine. So instead of leasing my machines, I purchased used machines, like the stuffing machines, the ones that print the addresses on the envelopes. So I can do like 2,000 mailing in 1 hour. Easy, right? So then my intern, we started seeing results, right? So I'd send out 2,000 and I'd get a listing and the listing would sell, you know? So we ended up this year increasing it to 3,000. Well, then after we increased it to 3,000, about 2 months ago, I was like, what if we do a mailing to this whole area? How many homes are there? Well, it was a couple of thousand more. So he goes, we'd be at 5,000 then. So I was like, all right, so 5,000. So let's see what this calendar looks like. So we break it down to twice a week. The mailings go out. We've got every neighborhood gets a letter every month. And I don't even know how many. There's probably like 15 to 18 neighborhoods. So I've got a calendar and it says, okay, this neighborhood, this is the day, you know, for it to go out. And the letters are pretty simple because they're all the same every month. I just, you know, put what houses have sold in their neighborhood and I change out my,
it's like a market update letter. So it's like a market update letter. Here's what's happening in the area.
I basically took a just sold postcard and, you know, upped it by making it a letter, And you know what's funny? Some people like really think I'm talking to them personally. So like I'll get a call, I'll go meet with them and they'll be like, yeah, we saved all your letters. Thanks for letting us, stay informed.
Yeah, it's awesome. We've had that happen in the past. We don't do a lot of mail anymore, but it is mind blowing when they open that drawer, like in the wet bar, and they're like, here's the last 11 letters. You're like, what?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So,
but you know what, Todd, you said about how you don't do it in the past, you don't do it in where they used to. And it's the same thing with me. You think about like, so I stopped doing it for a while, but when I was doing it on a regular basis, I was getting over 25 closings per year from it. And that was just when I was doing a couple thousand per month. So now that I'm going to be at 5,000, I mean, it's, exponential.
Yeah.
But having an intern, just hiring a part-time person, and this is their job, and here's the calendar, and here's how you're going to do the search for the homes and update it. I mean, really, it's not that hard. We just made it hard.
Yeah. We've had interns throughout the year, and we've done them two ways, unpaid and paid. Typically the younger ones that are still in school that aren't super, super skilled, we give them the option. If you go the paid route, then you're going to have to kind of stay narrowly focused on task and deliver some value. If you go the unpaid route, we'll give you wide open access to the company or companies to learn as much as you can. There'll be some work, but it'll also be a lot of kind of watching and learning and shadowing. And we've had them do all kinds of things. Now, the reason we didn't continue mail is we never had much success with it. Now, we do a lot of newsletters and we have success with that, but I'm taking notes as well because I think what you're doing is really smart. And that part of the magic of it is that you just do it. You just actually get it done. I mean, a better letter is better, but something sent to 5,000 people every month is going to produce something, and it's better than nothing. The other point I want to really emphasize, if you guys have not caught on to Regina's pace of things, 31 sold in her first 6 months. Let's start sending some mailers. Well, forget it. Let's just buy the equipment. It's kind of pedal to the metal, right? And that doesn't mean you need to replicate that, but it does mean that if you're going to commit to doing something, give it a full effort. I always tell people, if you're going to try something, give it every ounce of effort you can and give it at least 6 months. And depending on what it is, some things need a year, some things need 90 days or whatever. But a lot of us are trying things and they didn't just blow us over with ROI in the first 5 minutes. And so they quit and move on to something else. And we're in an industry where there's an unending list of shiny new things to try and people to sell us stuff. So I really want to applaud what, I don't want to insult you, but what from the outside in looks like a very simple approach. And you and I know it's not quite that simple, but it's focused, right? You door knocked, it's done really well. You work a lot of repeat referral. Now you're doing some mail and you do a lot of it. And you're, for the most part, consistent with it. And you invest significantly in the thing that's working. And, you've acknowledged there's some things you could go back to, but that's part of growth. I think a lot of people could take a lot away from that, even though if you're not really leaning in, that could sound like really, okay, she knocked some doors and she sent some cutting letters, whoop-de-doo. But look, success leaves clues, and success is often simple, repetitive, and sometimes boring. The 57th time you're sending those letters, I'm sure you're like, oh my gosh, it's not my favorite thing to be doing today. But
right. But that's the point of really assigning it to someone else, because you're right. Because I left myself in charge of all these different things, I got bored, and I just stopped doing it. I'm like squirrel, so I just, interested in something else at the moment. So I look back and I'm like, my business, I used to always complain to the old owner of the company that I used to work for. And I say, those plaques on the wall, they all have the same dollar amount every single year, right? Every single year, my units and my volume were always the same, right? And that was from the 2006 all the way through the 2016. So my plaques were always the same. Well, the thing is if I did the door knocking and the mailing, right? If I kept doing that and then added the additional things like calling the past clients, if I added that, I would be well over 100 transactions. But because I did not delegate and continued to make sure I had staff that would take care of some of these things and relied on myself, I've always been typically between 60 and 75 transactions. And I mean, most people would say, well, that's pretty good at the net income that I make, right? I know. But I'm like, I'm always stuck.
Yeah. Well, I was going to take a quick time out and force you to acknowledge that real quick. There's a lot of people on here that are like, shut up, get me to 60. But I want, I don't want to filibuster. I want to keep the attention on you, but I think there's a point to be made here that we all sort of have a mental comfort level, right? And it depends on your context and who you're around, how you grew up and what you want out of life and all those things. And so it's interesting that regardless of the methodology you took for lead gen, you kind of always find the same deal, same results. One of our core values on our team is that you are the product of your own expectations, right? So you expect a lot out of yourself, but there's a point that when you're doing 60 something transactions and you're traveling every other month that you're like, I'd like to do more. I don't have to do more. I'm gonna be fine if I don't. And so sometimes that's that subconscious kind of very hard to battle thinking that we're not always aware of, that it's like, well, I started doing this and I kind of stopped doing that, or I hired someone and then I let them go. And, you know, we all have room to grow, no matter where you are in production or leadership or experience. It's, in my opinion, it gets harder and harder to grow, right? Because the areas you need to grow are less and less obvious to yourself and others. And so for you right now, you have this huge opportunity to grow and maybe layering multiple successful lead sources. I always talk about, 3 main pillars of the business, and we can talk about that at some other time, but at least 2 to 3 primary lead sources. And, you've got 1 or 1.5, and repeat and referral is a really broad one, but you've done so well with it. But,
I got Facebook too, but we didn't talk about that.
And you shared some great stuff at the event, and we'll get to it if we have time. But the point I want to make for people watching is this is doable for you, right? And Regina is super humble and is acknowledging areas that she still wants to grow in. So you never get there. You're always learning and growing. And not only is she sharing on this, but she's watching all the other ones and learning and growing. And Kevin and I are taking notes from Regina right now. And there's so much opportunity. I want you to believe that you can get there. If Regina's business model is something that you want out of your life, or there's aspects of it that you want, you absolutely can do that. I've got at least one more really big question, Kevin, but what do you have coming in?
Here's a kind of interesting one. So do you think that in the coronavirus direct is direct mail going to become more important?
So I love the coronavirus question because I feel like I have an advantage, and my advantage is that I was an agent in October 2008. And anyone who was an agent in October 2008 remembers that is the month that Bush bailed out the banks. I remember that in my first 6 months, I was working for Century 21 then. And in my first 6 months, I did like 7 million in real estate. And I only had to do 1 million more in the second half of the year in order to make what was called their centurion status, right? So I didn't do that $1 million in that second half of the year. I actually did like 800,000 in that second half of the year. And the reason was because I was watching the stock market, I was watching the news, and I was completely buying into the fact that I thought nobody was going to buy houses, nobody could get loans. There was no possible way to do any kind of business. So that was the 1 year that I actually didn't make that centurion status. I made it every other year of my career, and sometimes, double status, but I didn't make it that year. And it had nothing to do with Bush bailing out the banks and what was going on. So then, unfortunately, 2 years ago, we had Hurricane Florence that hit Wilmington. And I thought I was going to go into foreclosure. I thought we'd have bankruptcy. If anybody saw what happened with Florence, we had a hurricane come and hit us for 3 days, traveled through our town at 2 miles an hour. Yeah, you could have walked out of the hurricane faster. 3 days of a hurricane, every tree that was 100 years old was down on the ground. I didn't think any business was going to happen. And I basically got back into that tunnel of thinking like the world was ending. Fortunately, I had a coach. And listen, I can't speak highly enough for why everybody who wants to be a good agent should have a coach, because my coach was away at the time. My coach was actually in Italy at the time. And he called me to basically tell me what I needed to do, because I personally could not see what I needed to do. So he told me what I needed to do. And the goal was to friend everybody, to offer assistance. How can I help you? Don't talk about buying or selling houses at that time. So that's what he told me. And it took me many, many months to recover. And that resulted in last year being well, not last year. I think the year before was my lowest sale. I think that year I did like 51 or 52 transactions. That was my worst year. And that was just like, a few months of just trying to figure out how to figure this out. I think it took me like 3 or 4 months to try to figure out what to do. Well, when coronavirus happened, my first reaction with the stay home order was, I'm going to stop doing letters and I'm not going to call people because I don't want to bother them. That was my first reaction. But then my coach, stepped up and started saying, okay, here's what you're all going to do. You're all going to friend everybody and you're all going to say that you're there and you're going to reach out to them and you're going to support them. So I did that for first few weeks. Well, then I decided to play around on Facebook, right? And put how many houses had gone under contract in the last 24 hours and how many houses have gone under contract in the last 1 week. And I started putting those messages up on my Facebook page and people started sending me messages, thanking me for telling them that houses were selling because they were in this doom and gloom. The news wasn't talking about houses still selling. And so some people, maybe people who had job transfers or maybe people who bought a new house already and they were fixing up their house to sell it, right? Maybe now they have 2 houses. So there were all these people that I didn't really think about that would want to sell their house. Well, they were seeing my messages, right? So about 3 weeks into the stay home, maybe 2.5 weeks, I decided to start my letters all over. That first batch of letters that I sent out immediately got a listing. And you know what? That listing went under contract within 1 day, closed within 2 weeks. So it already closed. Our shutdown is going to end on Friday. And I have a closing that resulted from me moving forward,
We've been telling everyone in our coaching group, actually, I've referenced your posts in there, but, and you and I talked about this over the last couple of days, but having that contrarian viewpoint is really compelling. So if the news of the day is like the world's coming to an end, the economy's crumbling, and you're saying, actually, there's some really great opportunity in the market right now. And I don't, we want to do that safely and appropriately with all due respect to, everybody's, germs and not touching everything, all that kind of stuff. But there's a great opportunity with low interest rates to buy right now. Home values are still rising because we have such low inventory. So there's a great time to sell. There's a message to be had. Now we've got to deliver that with compassion, but I love the way you built up that answer, right? I was here in 2008. I was here during a hurricane and I'm here now. And I've learned along the way that, and the way I might say that is with experiencing different things in a totally different market is what I've learned along the way is there is plenty of business out there for me, for our team to hit our goals in almost any scenario. And unless you live in an itty bitty market where that may, I want to respect that may not be completely true for everybody, but we can shift and we can be agile. And it's not just about us hitting our own goals. It's about those people that we can serve and add value to when they are otherwise terrified. They're confused, they're uninformed, they're relying on the headlines of the day, which are not intended to help and add value in people's lives. They're intended to get views and clicks and listens and all that kind of stuff. So when we can say, hey, time out, I know you're hearing this, this, and this, but let me tell you what's really true. If you need to move forward, here is the way. If you need to move forward, here's some positive news. If you need to move forward, here's what you can sleep well at night knowing. And I've talked to you a little bit about how you're doing that and how in some ways the mail strategy that you have, the direct mail strategy that you have going now is on top of a strategy of don't stop, don't hunker down, don't curl into a ball and wait. You want to expand on that or?
So for those first 2 weeks that we had the shutdown, I knew that I had to fix my mindset, right? It's really easy to reach out to 50 agents and they're all going to say that they're staying home and they're going to wait it out. And that's the right thing to do. And we shouldn't be going into anyone's homes and blah, 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 right? There's so many people that I could reach out to that are going to support that mindset, but I didn't want that mindset. So I had to seek out people that were doing things. So for example, hey, Greg Harrelson, he's awesome, right? So I started watching Greg Harrelson's videos and stuff, and I'm listening to him, and I'm like, okay, there's somebody doing something. So I felt like I had to seek out people, right?
Right.
Abe with Greg Harrelson, it was awesome. Abe decided that we were going to have a 30-day accountability. Look, 50 sit-ups, 50
Put those things away.
push-ups.
Careful, you got a permit.
I was doing a 3-minute plank, but let me tell you about exercise, right? It was great. 30 days of keeping it up every day, checking in, and having a group that was doing something other than talking doom and gloom was huge. So let me just bring this back to my Facebook page for a minute. I made that decision, the first week or two, I think I was probably posting things about, be careful about the coronavirus and here's things you should know. Well, after a few weeks of that, I changed my mind and I decided to put positive messages, putting about things that are going on, and at one point I was talking to another agent friend of mine, and that agent, he said, "Hey, I noticed on your Facebook page, you're always trying to be all like everything's wonderful. And I just want you to know everything's not wonderful." You know what? I get that. But people hear enough about things are not wonderful that they want to gravitate. It's just like, I don't know if you remember, Todd, but at the Real Geeks thing, my biggest aha moment to give to everybody about how do you generate business from Facebook? How do you get people to visit your site? Is I said, think of it like a party, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're at a party and the person that is most interesting is the one that people are going to go to, right? And they're going to go visit their page. And that's how I've gotten so much business from Facebook, is really keeping things positive and not going down the path that everyone else is going down.
Yeah. The guy who sent you that, it's like, hey, thanks a bunch, Carl. Appreciate the information. There's bad stuff happening in the world. I had no idea, because not every other media source on the planet is posting about it constantly. I always think it's funny when there's a real estate agent, especially, who thinks that they need to be the news source for all of their social media contacts. They're just constantly reposting, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, like all of it. Here, hey, did you guys know this happened today? You're like, yeah, I saw it when they posted it, dude. So again, that contrarian viewpoint, right? In the face of all the pessimism, be optimistic. It's not blindly optimistic. It's not like you have your head in the sand and you're not aware. And that's that piece you were talking about, like reaching out to people to be helpful. So at risk of making this all about coronavirus, I don't want to do that, but you shared with me earlier a strategy that you used on price adjustments.
Oh yeah.
For your clients immediately, it kind of, when Corona hit and you were like, okay, this is going to be a thing. What did you do?
Yeah. So the very first or second week, immediately I contacted all of my clients, all of my active listings. And I said, look, I want to warn you, here's what I'm looking at. If all of these companies are being told to shut down and they're not getting any assistance immediately, so unemployment or business money, I'm worried about how this is going to affect the future employment in our town, because we've never really had a great job market here. We're a beach town. So I said, I'm worried that it could cause a slowdown in our real estate market. And just realize, if you have vacant homes or houses have been on the market for a while, those prices are going to start to drop. And this was before we had the shutdown even longer than we expected. So I recommended that they highly consider lowering the price to more of what their bottom line would be. So that way we could get their house under contract and sold before the shutdown or the stay home order ends and all the additional houses come on the market. I said, let's get your house sold before the other houses come on the market. And most of my clients took my advice and they're all under contract. So it was great.
And the takeaway here is immediate action, right? Your market may be different, right? In our market, actually, we did not recommend price reductions. We recommended hang tight. The values are very strong here. And historically, we're an incredibly strong job market. Now, we've been hit like everybody else, but that was the right strategy here, as we're breaking records in our radio advertising and our online advertising, our email. We're telling the stories of having the right strategy and not leaving too much equity on the table. But the point is, you got to have a strategy. You can't just keep going and ignore change, and you can't bury your head in the sand and complain about all the negatives. You got to make some adjustments. And all of us are in businesses at a size where we can make those adjustments. It's a privilege. It's a gift to be able to do that. If you're at IBM, it's very hard to make a quick pivot in your business because some immediate change has occurred. We put together an entire COVID-19 agent game plan for our team members. We're even sharing that with other real estate agents in our own market. When they're on the other side of our transaction and they're kind of wonky about what to do right now, we're like, hey, we'd be happy to send you our coronavirus COVID-19 game plan. I think it might help you with showings and offers, and it'll help both of us get this done and help you with your clients. We've given that to all of our coaching consulting clients. We send it to Real Geeks, and I think anybody that wants it, Real Geeks is just going to get it to you. I think they're going to email it out or whatever. So I'm happy to share that with everybody. But the point I want to make is that when you realize, okay, this thing is here to stay for a while, this is going to, this is going to dictate our market for a while. You took immediate action, you had a consistent strategy, and you communicated it well to your clients. And like you said, most of them listened to your advice, and every one of them is under contract. I'm sure some that didn't experience the same results.
Well, and they're also not under contract.
That's so my point. Yeah, I wasn't going to answer for you, but that was my assumption, is that they, they're experiencing the consequences of not following expert guidance. So I love that you did that. And I love that we can share that with other people, because I think it's really constructive, right? If it's a hurricane, if it's a virus, if it's a super harsh winter, if it's an interest rate adjustment, we have the privilege and the ability to make pivots, make adjustments in our business, in our messaging, in our advocacy and leadership of our clients. And you jumped on the phone. You didn't wait for them to call you, right?
Right. I think, Todd, too, you brought up a good point about how what I do might not really be the best thing for your area. I think it's important as a professional real estate agent to know, to have an idea about how your market is going to react. I'm a beach town. We don't have big corporations. We're travel and tourism. The vacation, the hotels, everything is shut down here, and we're in our peak spring season, versus like maybe your market is closer to a city and they have, big businesses. I think it's important when people are trying to get guidance as to what should they tell their customers about, is the prices going to change or not? I think it's really important to gather the information, but really make sure you're familiar with your market.
I mean, you're speaking my language. In starting a week or two into this coronavirus thing, we did weekly group coaching in our group with, hey, do you know your market numbers? Do you know what happened in 2008? Even if you weren't an agent then, you can still speak authoritatively on that. You just need to go back and do the research, interview agents that were there. So you're speaking my language. The other thing is, on that COVID-19 agent game plan that everyone can have for free, customize that. It's like you said, you may want to treat that a little differently in a coastal beach vacation town. One of our coaching clients does a tremendous amount of VRBO business. Well, you got to speak to that out of town vacation VRBO owner totally differently than you're going to speak to a Dallas, Texas, I'm selling because of a job change. It's just, we're all in different markets. There are some things that are true for all of us, but a lot of things need to be handled based on your local expertise. And you need to trust your expertise, or you need to build your expertise. But we are not in a one size fits all business. And I love how you illustrate that. I think it's really, really constructive for people to take that away.
I forgot to tell you one more thing. When I started posting every week. Every week I post, here's in our area, here's the number of houses, the new listings that come on the market, the pendings, and the sold. Well, I also track the price reductions in our market. But I don't post that on Facebook, because on Facebook, I'm trying to give people all the positives, right? Sure. So the price reductions I feel should not be posted on Facebook, but I need to know about it. I need to know people are reducing prices.
Well, if those posts work, then you're going to get into conversations where you need to tell you're not hiding part of the story, but you can't tell the whole story. The other thing that I think is valuable, if people are writing this down as a quick strategy, do that. Start posting all the activity that's happening in your market, just as an encouragement that things are still going on. I think it's great to do year over year comparisons too, as long as they're constructive. Our total overall market activity is only down 12%. You might have thought it was much more than that. If it's down 60%, again, that might not be the stat you lead with, but you want to know that so that you can tell a seller, here's how you respond to that, or a buyer, here's how you respond to that. There's opportunity all over the place. We just have to adjust our strategy. So I know we're nearing running out of time, but there's a few more shares I know you have. And you had mentioned several easy strategies, technologies, apps, kind of tools that you use. One was Pat Live. One was Sky Slope. Were there some other ones you were going to share?
Google Drive, Ring Central, especially if you like to travel and you don't want your customers to know that you're away, you can call from the office number.
So Google Drive, so you can access your files and your checklist from everywhere. Ring Central, so you can kind of ghost your phone number through your office. Was there anything else that we missed, or were those the key four?
I'm sure there's a lot more. You know, I want to say that I use Facebook Messenger just as often as I use text messaging. So when I have a client and I know that they go on Facebook, I friend them on Facebook. Right. So then over the years, I stay in their lives. And I've had a lot of clients send me a message on Facebook like, hey, I'm thinking I want to sell my house. They send it through Facebook. So I think Facebook Messenger is totally underutilized. I'm looking to see what else I use. I use like Video Shop is like a real quick way to do some attaching of videos together. I use a gimbal device. We didn't even talk about this, but I do Facebook Live videos, not all the time, but quite often enough. And so I use my DJI gimbal for that. Makes it super smooth. I'm sure there's a million, but you know,
sure.
I don't want to.
I love how a lot of what you're sharing, people can write down and go implement right away. I mean, it's if you're watching this and you're thinking simple, true story, but in the best way. You know, Regina is super sharp and she's not allowing herself to get spread in 100 different directions. She's finding some things that work, going hardcore, buying the darn equipment, you know, going after it, keeping it simple so that there isn't the need for 27 other people and confusion that you can't leave behind and travel and enjoy your life. So I love it. I absolutely
Canva, you know, you got the Canva app, you can have the template already set up. So then when you have a house under contract or a new listing, you can just put it right into the template and post it right from your phone. Yeah. So, you know, I could be, okay, not that I do this or anything, but I could be at a stoplight and post a just sold house on Facebook.
In theory, you could do that theoretically.
In theory, you know, but don't do this at home.
Yeah. So I love it. A lot of what you started with was old school, get it done real estate that just works, knocking doors and direct mail. And now you've kind of wrapped up with a lot of social media stuff that's really powerful. And I know you're doing videos from open houses and promos, and there's some ways that you can kind of run some boosted
stuff. Take the video,
you
film the video on Facebook, you copy the video, you put it on YouTube after, if you want to tweak it or not, put it on YouTube, then put it on your blog.
And milk that content for all it's worth. So any final notes to wrap up on, Kevin? Any questions that are just bursting out, or how do you want to?
Yeah, everyone's super curious about your social media. So they want to know, are you posting on your personal page, or are you using a company page? Are you using Instagram? And what are you posting? Are you doing listings or market stats, or what are you putting up?
So I have a business page. I don't always post on the business page. I probably post like a few times a week on there. But on my personal page, I post throughout the day. See, the thing with Facebook is I've heard people say, well, you should only post once a day. Well, then what about that person that's on Facebook at 6 o'clock? They missed your post. Or what about the person on Facebook at 10 a.m.? They missed your post. So I post on my personal page throughout the day, all kinds of clean things, right? Clean. I'm not really going to post that I'm, you know, drinking at a bar, maybe, I don't know. But the thing is that you have to understand with Facebook, I probably get at least one closing a month from Facebook, I'm sure. Facebook, they want to know you. They want to get to know you as a person. And so if you think that you're going to take your business page and fill it with just listed and just sold posts without having anything personal, you're not going to get one follower. You know, go right now, check out your company's page, right? So if you're like with one of those big companies where they post all their listings and solds, go take a look at it and see how many likes are on each one of their posts. And then go see who the likes are. They're their fellow agents.
Right.
If you actually want people to follow you on Facebook, you need to show them things. Show them a picture of your cute little dog. Show them a picture of dinner that you're making. Give them a video of something that you're doing, and don't worry about the video being perfect. I've done Facebook Live videos and the price has been wrong. The other day I said 3 bathrooms and it was 2 bathrooms, and I laughed at myself, and people sent me a message and said, I love that you can laugh at yourself.
Yep.
So if nothing else, learn to laugh at yourself. You'll get a lot more business that way.
And be yourself, right? So, you know, don't try to be somebody you're not. I would communicate this from a marketing perspective of like, tell people stories, right? Spitting data at people nonstop. And, you know, name a business page on any social media that you like visit all the time. You know, people just don't do that. But you engage with people that are funny, that all, you know, that tell great stories, that have, you know, pets if you're into pets, or travel amazing places if you like to travel. That's what you follow. So it's a great way. I always say like attracts like. It's a great way to draw in clients that are like you, and they'll be more fun to work with anyway. One of the things I've seen you do is you'll say, hey, where am I in Wilmington? And you'll make people guess where you are, like at a restaurant or at a scenic spot or whatever. You know, just if that's how you roll, let people in on that. I think that's what you're saying. I've watched you do that at a really high level.
I could truly spend an hour just talking about tips on social media, things that you could do. Like, for example, taking on your Facebook business page and creating an album for each one of your listings. You create an album, you put all your pictures on there. And the cool thing about that is then people look at all the different pictures and they share the different ones that they like instead of the one or two, right? And then as they're sharing, you can then friend, or you could follow, you know, these other people. And as they're sharing, then you're like, oh, are you looking for a house? Have you talked to a lender yet? You know, the point is when they share or when they comment about something, is having further conversation. Again, I know we're running low on time, so it's a whole other learning curve.
Yep. That's fun. I appreciate all that you have to share. And so much of it is quickly implementable. And I hope that what people take away from you is your drive, your focus, and your willingness to be yourself, because I think those are absolute key elements to building a really great business. And you're building the business that you want, that supports the life you want to live. And that's what I tell our team members and our coaching clients all the time is, otherwise real estate can be successful from a financial perspective, but it owns you. And you're trying to fit your life around this business that's become a thing, but you're, at least from what we can tell, you've got a heck of a business and it's supporting a really wonderful life. So thank you so much for sharing. And I'll hand it back to you, Kevin.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Regina. It's very inspiring. I love your energy, and I'm hoping that people can learn from some of what you've done. So Todd's COVID game plan, we're going to send that out to our whole Keeping It Real mailing list, where we announce new episodes. And it will also include the replay of this video, so you can play it back and see everything that Regina has said. And if you're not on our mailing list, you can get on it by going to keepingitreal.com and just put in your email. We're not going to spam you. We'll just tell you about new episodes as they come out. So thanks again, Regina, and thank you, Todd. And we'll see everybody next time.
Thank you.
See you guys. Thanks, Regina.
Bye.